Okay, we are live. Hey, my name's Tim Westbrook. I am the host of I Love Being Sober, and I love being sober. I love my life today. I love all of the things that being clean and sober has afforded me, and I love it. It's amazing. And I'm here with Andre Norman, and Andre, aka the Ambassador of Hope, is Andre's got an amazing story, and Andre here, I'll read his bio. Andre Norman's childhood prepared him for nothing less than a life of crime and violence, and eventually led him to be sentenced to over 100 years in prison. During his 2-year stay in solitary confinement, Andre had an epiphany, and he made the decision to turn his life around. And after serving 14 years, he walked out the doors of prison a free man. Now known as the Ambassador of Hope, Andre's experience and expertise in what empowers him to help people turn their situation around. Andre travels around the world to serve as a mentor and listening ear for many in need. And today I'm going to talk to Andre about risk and understanding risk. And we're going to talk about anger, because this show is I Love Being Sober, and Andre's drug of choice was anger. So we're going to talk about that. And it looks like we just lost Andre. So hopefully Andre comes back to us very shortly. And Andre is now he's a senior fellow at Harvard. So after going to prison, he ended up at Harvard, and being at Harvard, he actually has an office at Harvard. He does lots of service work today, and he has really turned his life around, and experienced strength, hope, service work. And again, his drug of choice was anger, and he attended 12-step meetings while he was in prison for anger. And he just has such an amazing story. Andre, I'm so glad that you made it back on the show. Welcome. It's really good to see you. Long time no see.
Good to see you, my friend, and thank you for having me. And I want to say thank you to all the people who are watching. It's a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So tell me about your upbringing. Tell me, where did you grow up, and tell me what your life was like.
Born in Boston, Massachusetts. Raised by a single mom. It was kind of hectic in the household when dad was there. It was a lot of domestic violence and problems. She moved on from that, and she had a single mom, 6 kids. Growing up in the city, it was kind of tough. Went to public schools, free lunch kid. I was a free lunch kid, and struggling through free lunch and poverty and trying to find your place. Then kids in middle school being mean to you because you don't have the cool stuff. You don't have dad telling to take you to the park and all that stuff. So you just kind of struggle, and you lose your way. Then by the time I got to high school, I was just like in a gang in the streets and just getting in trouble. By the end of high school, I dropped out. I just ended up going to prison. Now, I tell people I went to prison not because I was black, not because I came from the inner city, not because I had a single mom. I went to prison because all the opportunities that I had, I quit on. I quit on band. I quit on track. I quit on leadership. I quit on sports. I quit on everything. And when you quit on all your good stuff, it only leads you to negative. So I found myself at 17 with only negative options because I quit on all my positive options, and that took me to prison.
You're mute. Okay. And okay, so you ended up in prison, and you essentially you were enlightened when you were in solitary confinement.
Yep.
Tell me what happened there.
The first 6 years of my sentence, I convinced myself that I was doing a good thing, and I was convinced myself that I was doing great things, and I was winning, as I would say. I'm a gang member. I'm a gang leader. I'm doing all kinds of bad stuff in jail, and I have status. I have ranking. I have people who fear me, who scared of me, and I thought that I was winning. My mom came to see me one time. I was in solitary confinement. She said, "How did you get in jail? And I was like, "What are you talking about? This is the life. This is what it is." And she walked out of there crying. And the thing that I didn't understand is I thought being in prison was cool. I thought being a gang leader was cool. I thought being in solitary confinement was cool. I convinced myself that everything that was truly negative was a positive. I made it make sense to me. I rationalized and justified my whole existence instead of telling myself the truth. You're locked up in a cage all day and this isn't cool. And after being in that state of mind for a while, I realized that I was the king of nowhere. I was actually the king of nowhere. Nobody cared where I was. It was all made up in my own mind that I was doing something great and I wasn't. I came up with the concept that I don't want to be the king of nowhere and I don't want to be here anymore. I said, looked at myself and said, well, what am I going to do to change it? The first thing I did was tell myself the truth. Who are you? Who are you, Andre? I said, I'm Black. I'm undereducated. I'm saying I'm in a gang. I'm in prison. I'm in solitary confinement. I have anger issues. I don't have parental support. I don't have a lot of finances. I just told myself the truth about everything and wrote it down. Then I started working on that list, one thing at a time. I got my GED. I went to anger management. I started going to self-help groups. I went to the law library. I started trying to work on relationships with my family. It took me 8 years of doing this work to actually get out of prison after serving 14 years.
Okay, so would you say that anger, I mean, I'm assuming, and we've talked about this before, that you were going to, so why did you end up going to 12-step meetings while you were in prison?
Well, I didn't actually do drugs or drink, but I had a lot of anger issues and I used to fight and hurt people a lot. So I went to every program they had. I went to anger management and I mastered that. I went to college. I did great at that. I ran out of programs. And then somebody took me one day and said, Dre, come on with me. And he took me to AA and he sat me and I said, dude, I don't drink. Why am I here? He said, just sit down. And he introduced himself and he introduced me. He said, Andre's a great guy. He doesn't have a drinking problem. He has an anger problem. And then the leader of the group said, Andre, you're going to hear a lot of stuff in here. But what you need to do is when you hear us talk about alcohol, you substitute it for anger. And you can come here as much as you want. We welcome you. And they took me to NA. It was the same thing. They said, when you hear us talk about drugs, you substitute it for anger. And I went to these self-help groups because they were there, they were available, and it's all I had an option. It was the only thing that was available to me. And they opened the door and they welcomed me and they taught me all the steps of how to better your life and how to actually take accountability, take track, make amends, you know what I'm saying, higher power, all that stuff worked for me with anger as it worked for them around alcohol and substance abuse. I mean, bettering yourself is bettering yourself. So AA works for everybody if you let it.
Right. And really it's in the rooms of AA, talk about alcoholic behavior. And that's the thing. It doesn't matter what it is. Alcoholic behavior can take so many different forms, whether it's alcoholism, drug addiction, gambling, watching porn excessively, cheating on your wife, cheating on your loved one. They're all of excessively looking at Facebook, lie, cheat, steal. And it's like the selfishness and self-centeredness. And so it doesn't matter. Like there's so many different forms, and that was your outlet was anger, right? And
Right.
you ended up getting in fight. You ended up, weren't you a prison at one point?
What happens is all people, whether they're addiction, whatever your addiction is, that's the pain. And once you have the pain, you seek relief. Some people's relief is alcohol. Some people's relief is gambling. Some people's release is porn. Some people's release is workaholism. Some people's release is whatever their thing is. My release was anger and violence. That was my release. So whatever your thing is, that's the pain. Then you look for your release. So a lot of people's addiction is really their release from their pain, their escape from their pain. And that's what I did. I sought by fighting all the time and attacking people all the time. For those moments, I was not dealing with my pain. But as soon as it was over, it would come back. And I'm still living in the same problems and hurt that I was living in 20 minutes ago. And I find somebody else to fight. So as much as you might drink or somebody else might shoot or sniff or whatever they do to keep the pain away, I would fight.
Right. It's a solution to the pain. Your solution was anger. And whenever somebody goes on a binge, and let's say somebody's sober for a while and then they drink, they use, and then they're filled with guilt and shame and remorse. And I would imagine that you have those same feelings after you get in a fight or after you cause damage or after you hurt somebody.
Correct. I
Okay.
mean, the feelings and emotional cycle isn't any different, regardless what your addiction is. I mean,
Right.
we've suffered whatever trauma we call trauma. We interpret it however we interpreted it. My son, it was probably 2 years ago. He came to visit me, and I bought him a little thing that you can talk to that plays music. It was like a Google Home. It was $50. Then right before he went home, he won a Google Home at some event. So I said, hey, I took one of them back and said, you don't need two. And he was mad at me for 6 months. He was hurt about that. He had plans for that Google Home. And when I took it from him, I never had the conversation. He was highly upset about that. And he really didn't want to talk to me until I probably pressed the issue. What is the problem, son? What is this disconnect? And it all came out to that Google Home. A $50 device almost ruined the relationship with me and my son. But I was able to actually press through and we got to the bottom of it. But if I'd have never brought that up, that one thing could have derailed my son's relationship with me for the rest of our lives. Right. And we'd have been 15, 16, 17 years old trying to figure out what it was. It was a Google Home. It wasn't the Google Home. It was I took it without understanding or explanation for him. He took that as pain. And that pain prevented him from talking to me because he was in pain that I caused. So it's not always you're atrocious or you're mean or you're a bully. Sometimes it's simple as not being considerate, not communicating effectively can affect somebody in a way that creates a situation that they don't really want. My son didn't want to disconnect from his dad, but that pain that he felt for that Google Home created a situation where he felt as though I can't go to my dad. And it created that 6-month gap.
Right. So working through your anger or getting to the root problem of your anger, which is the same as someone getting clean and sober. What has that afforded? What did that afford you when that, like, so how long would you say, what would you say is your sobriety date? Like, do you have a sobriety date? Or would you say like, hey, there's a certain day that I've been, that I haven't
definitely. I can go back.
Okay.
I can't tell you the exact date, but it was 1991. I had my last fist fight.
Okay.
I had him routinely up until then. I had my last fist fight in 1991. And this last fist fight, I know it because we're in prison and the guy called me out for a fight. And he had like 8 guys about to beat him up. So instead of dealing with the 8 guys, he said, Dre, man, why are you putting your guys up to do your dirty work? I'm like, dude, this ain't got nothing to do with me. That's between you and them. Man, why don't you fight me since you got a beef? I said, dude, I ain't got no beef with you. But when you call me out in prison, I got to show up. So me and the guy went down to the gym to fight. I didn't really want to fight him, but I remember I picked him up, dropped him on his head and said, listen, man, leave me alone. I'm not the guy. I don't want to do this to you. And at the end of that, we had a scuffle, you can call it, because I did put hands on him. And that was the last time I put my hands on anybody, for the most part. That was it. That was, boom, 1991. Eric, I can't remember his last name. His first name was Eric. And but that was 1991 was the last time I actually assaulted somebody.
Now, what's life been like since you've turned around and you've gotten away from the anger? Like, what's life like today? Like, what did you start seeing as a result of, your sobriety from anger?
The first thing I saw was the challenges, because I had been known for being physical for so long that's how I communicated. That even though I didn't want to be physical, I had rid myself of the anger and of the pain, I've learned to control it. It was effective. It was effective at a communication space. People understood when I said, hey, I'll beat you up if you don't do this. They understood it and they got things done. So I had to find another way to motivate people and encourage people to do what I wanted without physical threats, which was tough at first because it was my communication style. Some people you can't be out with friends and not have a drink. It's social. The same way you socially drink, I socially threaten people. And I had to learn a new way of communicating. That was the first thing I had to do when I quit smoking cigarettes. You know what the hardest part of quitting smoking cigarette was? What to do with my hands. I spent 4 years doing this every day, all day. When I finally quit smoking and I was off tobacco, my hand would do this. Literally. I used to have to control myself. Finding something to do with my hand was hard because I subconsciously did this for 4 years, 24 hours a day. So dealing with the other end of being off or being away from what was socially acceptable and what was my normal thing to do was the first step. And the second step was I had to understand that bad thoughts don't make me a bad person. I will think violent thoughts. I will think mean thoughts. I will think aggressive thoughts. And that doesn't mean I failed. I used to think initially, well, damn, I thought about hitting somebody, I must not be fixed. I thought about hitting somebody, I must not be cured. I must be a bad person. And somebody's told me, Andre, you've been this way for 30 years. Now that you've changed and you've legitimately changed, your brain will still think of the option of hitting somebody. You just have to wait 5 or 10 seconds and a new thought will come. Yeah. Don't act on the first impulse. Just give it 5 seconds and your training and your therapy will kick in. At first, it took 5 seconds for that second thought to come. Then it was 4 seconds. Then it was 3 seconds. Now it's 0.2 seconds. But on occasion, I will still have a thought about hitting somebody. Then I wait and 0.2 seconds is like, yo, Dre, that's stupid. It's a waste of time. There's other ways, and just walk away. Whereas before, when I was 19 and 20, I just hit you and didn't go past what could come next. So accepting the fact that because I have thoughts doesn't mean I have to act on them. It doesn't mean I'm a bad person. It's just thoughts. I separate thoughts from actions. Now, lastly, that I'm free of the thoughts and I'm free of the behaviors. I can just enjoy life. It's so much easier going outside and so much more fun that I can go places and not worry about getting into trouble or getting arrested. I'm sitting in a police station. No, excuse me. I'm sitting in the sheriff's office right now doing this Zoom with you because I work with the sheriff down here in Genesee County in Michigan. And I'm here doing programs helping people to get through the things that I got through because it's success works. And people need to see people who've done it so they can know they can be done.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's so amazing. And it's like the gifts of recovery, right? The gifts of recovery is you get to help someone else. Exactly. You get to share your experience, strength, and hope. And
I went up on a unit today, and it was like 60 guys, and they see me, and they're like, "Yo, you made it! You made it!" Because every day they're in prison, every day they're in jail, every day they're in orange, and they don't see people who've made it. The only people they think about, if you're in jail, the only people you see are the people who went home and failed and came back. They only see failure. They only see failure 95% of the time. So when a guy who's returning citizen comes in who's successful, that means doing well, has a job, taking care, not getting in trouble. When that person comes back, it's like, wow, we can actually make it because there's a guy who made it. So it's super important that you show up in person and let people see the success of freedom and of sobriety.
Yeah. I think that's the same as like an alcoholic or a drug addict. When we see people that get 24 hours, 30 days, 90 days, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, it creates hope. And Definitely. So that's what you're doing. And so tell me about the name, the Ambassador of Hope. How did you get that nickname?
The Ambassador of Hope came from just helping people. And it became an ambassador when I started doing international. So at first I worked in the city of Boston, then Philadelphia, then New York, and then St. Louis, and then LA, and then Houston. I'm all over the country. Then I went to Guatemala. Then I went to Costa Rica. Then I went to Spain. Then I went to London. Then I went to Switzerland. Then I went to Sweden. I went to Amsterdam. I went to all these different, I'm going across the world helping people. And from my understanding, ambassadors go to international countries.
There you go.
So, hey, I started doing the work and the title fit. So there's an ambassador. Our country has ambassadors in every country in the world.
Right.
So
right.
I go to other parts of the world and I bring hope. So that's what Ambassador of Hope came from, because I go around the world now and I deliver hope to people.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, you bring a lot of hope because, I mean, statistically, if someone's in the system and they end up in prison, it's like, what are the chances that they're going to be in there for life, in and out for life?
The chances get really, really smaller when somebody who's been through the system and understands the system shows up and partners with the people who are actively running programs. I'm not the program. I'm the buy-in. I want to be clear. when I come in, I'm not running the day-to-day for the next 6 months, 8 months. I'm the motivation. I'm the spark. I'm the guy that gives you the go, get in the class guy. I'm the cheerleader, for lack of a better term. Well, I'm the justification for you going to class. Then a school teacher shows up and teaches GED. Then a therapist shows up and does counseling. Then the God shows up and does his part. I'm the guy that says, this is what you need to do to get to where I am. So I'm like kind of like the spark to get it started. And then we collaborate. It's a team effort. I can't help everybody every day. It's just not possible. So it's a team effort. You have to partner with people who can actually do the day-to-day work.
Right. Tell me about your the work that you do at Harvard.
Well, back in 2015, Michael Brown Jr. in Ferguson, Missouri was killed. And when he killed, the entire city broke into riots and protests. The entire country followed behind him. And for 18 months, that's what happened. You're saying Black Lives Matter was born. People were upset. They were frustrated. They were fighting against the system that would oppress them. And that's what it was. Then it was local business leaders in Ferguson who called me and wanted me to come and help with this communication between whites and blacks in Ferguson and help. How do we fix this and how do we solve this? And at the time, there was a professor, Charles Ogletree, at the Harvard Law School. And he awarded me a fellowship to do this work, to help me get the work done. And I went to Ferguson. I worked with a lot of the families. I worked with the community. I worked with the mayor, the police chief, the local politicians, and the local business people who just cared. And some were white, some were black, some were rich, some were poor, but it was people who cared and wanted solutions. In the midst of that, there was a gentleman who's like a brother to me, David Spence, who was like, listen, we need to make this bigger. So he brought the mayor, the police chief himself, and some other folks to Harvard. We brought the protesters to Harvard, and we had a big discussion around how do we make it better. Harvard hosted the panel, and we had that discussion. And the discussion actually went off the rails because people in the audience didn't want solutions. They wanted to be angry still. And then Dave, myself, and Dr. Ogletree got together for dinner. We were able to sit down and have conversations and come to a peaceful accord and come to a place where people all wanted to do and be better. So I was able to do that under the Harvard banner and got me a fellowship. And it was a wonderful thing because it was 23 years from the day I said I was going to Harvard to when they issued me my fellowship. And I just tell people, you never give up. You never give up. You keep pressing forward and you keep going forward. And here we are again. The entire Kentucky's locking itself down, bracing for the Breonna Taylor decision. Is the city and the state going to erupt in protest? They closed the courthouse. They're boarding up the courthouse right now because they're unsure what's going to look like when this decision comes out. And we have to get to a place in this country where the country has a racial addiction, where it refuses to acknowledge that we have racial issues. So we keep denying we have race issues, so we keep perpetuating the same problem going forward. At some point, we have to say as a country, we have a black-white problem in America. And this black-white problem creates these 30 things. Let's start working on them. But until we say collectively, we have a race addiction in this country and it's killing us. No different than heroin, no different than cocaine, no different than alcohol, no different than working too hard. Our racial addiction is killing us. Step one, because we deny it exists. Every addict in the beginning denies they have a problem. Our country is denying it has a problem, thus the problem keeps getting bigger. And right now we're at a point in time where we need to say we have a problem and let's get a solution. Let's get some treatment. Let's make it better. Nobody's saying to you, hey, you spent the last 6 months in the street on drugs, you're not any good. Or this country for the last 400 years has either oppressed, killed, or just ignored black people. We don't want to have that discussion. Let's have a discussion on how to make it better. I'm not negating who and what I am and where my people come from, but we can talk about the problem or we can talk about the solution. I'd rather do the solution first and solve it so everybody's safe, that we can go back and do history lessons and books on the problem. We're doing it the other way around and it's not working.
Right. So Understanding Risk is the name of this show or of this episode. And that was what you wanted to talk about. So let's talk about risk. What do you mean by understanding risk? What are you referring to?
Understanding risk. I'm sure you were at the Genius Network event when Keith Cunningham came.
Yes.
And Keith Cunningham gave one of the most brilliant presentations on risk that I had ever heard. that when you believe risk isn't there, that it becomes really attached. And I used to say, well, there's no risk. And the instant you say there's no risk, it quadruples in possibility because you're not paying attention, you're not guarding against it, you're not being diligent, you're not doing your due diligence because you believe there's no chance of something happening. So when I believe that I can never mess up again, I put myself at risk because now I'm not guarding against it. When I believe I can't relapse in my own space, I just put myself at risk because I'm not doing the things to keep me proactively sober and safe. So the concept of risk is you have to acknowledge that risk is real. And when you acknowledge risk is real, you do something about it. When you say risk doesn't exist, then you do nothing about it. Thus, you make yourself susceptible to anything that could go wrong. And stuff usually does go wrong.
Right. So you mentioned that your not understanding risk impacted the decisions that you made in your life all the way up until you got sober, right? Until you cleaned it up.
Right. When I was a young man, I didn't, most people in prison, I'm not excusing any crime, but if you go into prison and you see a guy who's doing 30 years for armed robbery, you ask him, did you know that you was going to come here and stay for 30 years for stealing that bike or breaking in that house? No. 95% of people generally don't understand the punishment associated with what they're doing. So most people who start getting high and they start down that path, they really don't understand the consequences long-term health-wise. You're ruining your kidneys, you're ruining your lungs, you're ruining different arteries. You're saying you're damaging other people. They don't understand the risk / consequences of their actions. Because you say to somebody, if you do this for the next 8 months, you're going to give your mother a stroke. Do you know that? They'll be like, nah, I thought she'd be okay. It was just on me. So people don't understand the risk and consequences of their actions, which enables them to keep doing them.
Right. You said that your inability to take risk impacted your life and impacted those around you.
Yes, sir.
What did you mean by that?
When I was 17, I was my high school's first ever foreign exchange student. I got an opportunity to go to Europe and be in a foreign exchange student, and I went. It was the greatest thing ever. I did such a great time on the exchange student tour that all the kids wanted to go back next year on whatever tour I was going. So all the families called the people and said, where is Andre going next year? We want to send our kid. They didn't know I was on a scholarship. So it was such an overwhelming response that the company called me and said, Andre, we're going to pay for you to go next year. We're going to pay for it. We're going to be sure put you on the most expensive trip we got. And then if these kids like you again, we'll make you a junior counselor. So at 17, I had a chance to be an international junior counselor for this exchange student program. And I didn't understand it. I didn't understand it, what that meant. And I blew it off and I went and did nothing. And 2003, I did a training for British Petroleum. Prudential Insurance. We're in Los Angeles. The entire board of directors is there. And then the president of the company, CEO, Jonathan Bloomer. We went out, we did the event, we crushed it. The entire board and the CEO were on fire. Then he says, I want to see him for breakfast. So I'm like, they say, Andre, Mr. Bloomer wants to see you for breakfast. I'm like, all right, cool. I come to breakfast. This man is just amazed, on fire, gratitude. He's like, man, we just changed lives. And he wanted to do more. And we're talking. We talked for like 5, 7, 10 minutes. I said, okay, man, it was nice to meet you. And I got up and walked away. What I didn't understand is this man who was on fire and wanted to do something ran a $400 billion company.
Yeah.
I didn't understand. I could have said, let's go take over Cleveland. Let's go to wherever. He was so hyped up with a good spirit, and he recognized that Andre can help change lives. He was saying to me, let's go change the world. But I didn't understand who he was and what it meant to be the CEO of Prudential Insurance. It's a multi-billion-dollar company. And the man that runs it wanted to partner with me and go change the world. And I didn't understand what he was saying. And I walked away in ignorance. And it wasn't anything rude. I was like, all right, nice to meet you. And I left. That was a career move. That was a career move and a great opportunity to impact millions of lives. And not understanding what is in front of you is important. So oftentimes I tell people, get educated, get educated, get educated, get educated, because opportunities are coming at us 1,000 miles an hour, but if we can't recognize them, they're just going to go by without us. So I can give you 10, 20 opportunities that I didn't understand, so I lost out on. Right. And when I lost out, there was thousands of people that should have been helped.
Yeah, I would say that's the same thing as doors open, doors close. And if a door opens, you've got to walk through it.
Yes.
And not knowing what's on the other side of it, right? It's like the same thing as just going outside of your comfort zone. Like, you got to go out of your comfort zone to grow.
I did not go because I was scared. I didn't go because I didn't know.
Right.
I mean, if I knew what it was, I'd have definitely went through the door, but it was the lack of not knowing. And again, going back and saying, do I risk the chance to tell people I don't know who he is? Do I risk the chance of exposing myself to say I'm not sure what he does or how I can be helpful? Do I go to somebody else after the meeting and say, well, how do I process this? Now, if I had a meeting with somebody I didn't understand, I would ask somebody on the front end. I might bring somebody with me. I definitely would ask different questions. And I walked around and asked somebody post, hey, this is a conversation, but I didn't know that I could have conversations. I didn't know that I could ask for help. I was still in the it's me against the world concept, and it wasn't that.
Right. But I think it's, and you talked about the guys that are in prison. It's like they didn't think about the fact that they were going to end up in prison for 30 years if they got caught. And I think what that speaks to is playing the tape forward, right? It's like, if I meet with this guy that's the owner and CEO of a $400 million company, and I get their phone number and I say,
put a B on that.
Billion. Yeah. 400 million, $400 billion. I mean, like, where could I go? Where could this lead to? And that's playing the tape forward, whether it's going to be bad or potentially a good thing. It's so important to play the tape forward before we make our decisions. And that's why I think, they say pause when agitated or doubtful. And it's just really being aware, thinking about things, making decisions, taking risk, going outside of your comfort zone, making good decisions, not thinking about completely Tim, or not thinking about just Andre and what's going to be comfortable for Andre. Like, really, what's going to be good for everybody, and what's going to help Andre get to the next level.
The biggest thing I did in that moment that messed me up was I didn't ask for help.
Right.
And that was like one of the things I thought I fixed. I fixed asking for help in negative situations. So if I want to hurt somebody or punch somebody or do something, I know to ask for help. Whether it's my higher power, one of my mentors, one of my guides, I know how to ask for help. I didn't know how to ask for help for positive things. Right. And you have to learn to ask for help in both spaces. It's not just ask for help when you're under pressure or under the gun. Sometimes you ask for help when things are going well to make them go better.
Right. So what do you want people to take away from your message today?
I want them to take away today that, you know something? Tim and Andre are friends. Tim and Andre are good people. That we hang out in person, not just on Zoom. That, anytime I come to Phoenix, you see, Dre, I do the fireside chats with you, man. I love coming out. And it's not about you becoming me becoming you. It's how can we help people be them? And that's what I want them to know. That, you know something? Tim and Andre are friends. And we care collectively and independently that people's lives get better. And that's it. You can, Andre did this. My life story is not going to change your life story. But the 12 steps and the programs and the treatment will change your life story. You know what I'm saying? I might spark you into the group, but it's the group that's going to help your life turn around. So don't make your sobriety or your success based on the individual. Make it based on the work. And we know, say, if the program works, if you work it. I'm saying you can't walk around telling my story, but you can walk around doing those steps. You can't walk around talking about I met Andre, but you can walk around with the practices and the protocols that are given to you. And those are things I want you to do. So many people get stuck on Andre went from prison to Harvard. No, Andre learned lessons on how not to quit. Andre learned lessons on how to ask for help. Andre learned lessons about how to better himself and tell the truth to himself and be accountable. Take those things away. I mean, the prison to Harvard thing is cool, but it's not what's going to get you there. Don't rush your kid in front of you. Got to go see this guy. He went from prison to Harvard. No, he learned actual factual action steps to rebuild his life. And it happened to take me to Harvard. And your action steps can take you someplace great.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, we're just about to wrap up here. Anything else you want to share with people? How can people reach you if they want to learn more about you, or if they want to reach out to you?
First, if you want to see me, come to a fireside chat. We're out here doing these things in Scottsdale and Tempe and Phoenix, fireside chat. We always need more community speakers. We always need more commitment speakers to come share a positive word. So you can meet me in the spirit of giving, because I'm someplace giving right now. You can be in your place giving. And if we're in the same spirit, we're in the same space. And if you want to connect to me personally, you can always reach out to Tim. He knows how to find me. And lastly, the social media, because I'm generally someplace different in the world every other day. AndreNorman.com, @AndreNorman for Instagram. It's just my name. You put my name in Google, you'll find me. And if you go to my website, all my social media stuff is there. I'm going to tell you about social media. Other people manage my social media. I'm not going to lie to anybody. If you want to talk to me, call Tim. And we can get on the phone. We can do something. If you go to my social media, somebody else is going to be sending you a message. I check it sometimes. I didn't grow up in that era, Tim. Grew up, we had phones on cables to the wall. When I was a kid, the phone was attached to a cord and it went to the wall. And that was social media for us. I don't want to send people, hey, social media, you follow me, but talk to me. I'm saying, if you want to be one with it, great. Let's find someone to help, and help starts at home. So how do you connect to me? Reach out to that brother, sister, niece, or nephew that you haven't talked to because they offended you or did something that you didn't like, and just tell them you love them. That's how you connect with me. Pay it forward, play the tape forward. And if you ever meet me in person, when we do meet, let's share stories about who we helped. I'm not worried about you read my book.
Amen to that. Andre, thanks again so much for your time. Really appreciate you. I know you're helping some people. You've got some things going on. That's why you're at
it's the Genesee Sheriff's Department in Flint, Michigan.
Okay.
The sheriff here has a program called Ignite, and he's helping change the dynamics around corrections and how you reach out to people and how do you actually make people's lives better in real time. Because granted, these men and women might be here for offenses, but if we help them get better, they won't come back. And that's his motto. How do we help? Not how did they get here, but how do we help them not come back? And that's his mission, and that's why I came. I saw him, I talked to him. He says, Dre, I want to help people. You know, we do that at Genius Network and Genius Recovery. We help people. We show up. He said, Andre, I care. I said, I'm on a plane. And we got off, and Genius Recovery's in the building, and we're helping support. It doesn't always have to be our initiative. Sometimes we lend our gifts to somebody else's initiative. So everybody thinks, oh, I'm going to start my nonprofit. I'm going to start my program. No, there's hundreds of programs. I don't need to start a drug addiction program in Phoenix. You're there. I come support yours. I don't need to open up a jail. He's here. I come support his. So supporting is important. We don't always have to recreate the wheel. Awesome. You want to give a quick shout out to Genius Recovery? Genius Recovery is an agency and a program developed by my brother, Joe Polish. And when we first met, our first and obvious conversation was how do we heal addiction and treat people with humanity, kindness, and respect. We don't try to punish people into being better people. We don't try to shame people into changing their lives. We just love them with honest information, accurate information, and clear information. And Joe Polish has been a champion for people with addictions of all kinds since day one. And it's what's made me, I'm saying, love that man and partner with him to bring forth this message of how do we help people heal? I'm saying, how do we help people understand their trauma, and how do we help people not be stigmatized and persecuted for having gone through something? Because the truth is, we've all been through something. And if yours is public or not, it shouldn't matter. So let's love people correctly. Let's help people be humans and treat them with kindness and help them be better and live a better life and not hold things over their heads and shame them with their past, because we all have a past. There's something we've all done that we're not proud of. And you've been able to get away from yours. Well, let's not hold them against theirs. So Genius Recovery is about bringing civility to people in need in real time with no strings and no BS. We just love you. We want to see you do better. You're saying we want to make sure you have the best information humanly possible with the best treatment. Respect your treatment, respect your journey, and respect where you're going to end up. That's what genius recovery is.
Awesome. On that note, Andre, thanks again so much. Have a good one.
All right. Thank you.
Bye-bye.